They say that curiosity killed the cat. I can safely say it wasn't only the cat which it killed. We were just kids and were told many stories by our elders. Some of them were intended to teach us lessons or morals, while others were designed simply to scare us. Whether it was to scare us, to prevent us from doing something stupid, or if it was to scare us just for the hell of it. By the age of 15, I wanted to know fact from fiction. Growing up next door to a cemetery helped me to develop a morbid kind of curiosity and a dark sense of humor, but it also helped me to inoculate me against a fear of the dead. My cousins, however, living in other parts, had not developed this immunity. It was a warm summer evening, and as usual, my cousins Paul and Charles were visiting for a few weeks during our summer holidays. We were close and got along very well, with very few disagreements ever happening between us. Since we were planning a weekend surfing and camping trip on the east coast of the island, Charles had invited a couple of his friends, Dirk and Fabian, over so we could get an early start on Saturday morning. Paul was 2.5 years older than me, and Charles was 1 year older. Charles was the real surfer among us. He was great, and he was considered by many of our friends to be one of the coolest guys on the island. Paul was the eldest, a bit of a goody-goody. He was very rarely in trouble and was a bit softer than Charles and I. Because of this, he was regarded as being the most responsible of the three of us by our parents. The five of us, Paul, Charles, Dirk, Fabian, and I, were sitting on my grandmother's porch. The sun was setting. Our parents and grandmother were visiting friends while we were left to our own devices that Friday. We were young and adventurous. We weren't bad kids, but from time to time we managed to get up to some form of wickedness. Legal drinking age back then was 16, and as Paul had turned 18 a few weeks earlier, he was nominated by us as the one to go buy the beers. We each contributed about $20 to the cause, which managed to get us 2 cases of beer, more than enough for our weekend of fun. I had appropriated a bottle of rum from my dad's bar earlier that evening, and we were making good progress in finishing it. Since my parents and grandmother left a few hours earlier, we were doing a good job at that. It was already nighttime when we decided to take a walk, hoping to ease the massive buzz we had accumulated. We were all laughing, talking nonsense, and having fun. I decided to take them through the cemetery, and as we entered, we began talking of scary events we experienced and stories we were told. The cemetery had no lights as usual, and while we were not afraid of the dark, there was something spooky about walking through a graveyard at night. As we walked, every noise became a suspect for something sinister. The blowing of the wind through the trees, dogs barking, howling around us, cats hissing and growling at each other, all compiled and were enhanced by the quantity of rum we had consumed earlier. Before long, we were almost walking arm in arm with each other, a tightly compacted unit of guys, talking nonsense, laughing and trying to one-up each other with scares. Having lived next door to the cemetery all my life, I knew or was told pretty much every haunted story or superstition about it. I also knew all the cool hiding places and how to take advantage of them. And this was a plan I was developing as we walked. This was my turf, and I was going to get them all. I was the youngest in the group. I was therefore usually the center for teasing. I was also the most rebellious of the lot, and I didn't take crap from anyone for any reason. As we got deeper into the graveyard, further away from ambient light, we began to hear what sounded like footsteps behind us. We all stopped at the same time and heard the crunch and crackling of leaves and twigs underfoot. What was it? None of us knew. All of us were getting a bit anxious by this point, but none of us wanted to admit it. It was probably just a stray dog anyhow. Dirk was the same age as Paul, and the biggest among us, over 2 meters tall and all muscle. However, the unfolding events in combination with alcohol were taking their toll on his nerves. His usually deep-timbered voice was now high-pitched and squeaky as he asked what the hell was it. We all listened intently in the darkness to see if we could make out what was coming our way. Dirk continued, "Dude, why the hell would you bring us through this place at night? This ain't right, man. Normal people don't just walk through cemeteries in the middle of the night like this. What's wrong with you?" We all sensed Dirk's fear, and it enhanced our own. However, his high-pitched voice lent some humor to the situation, and we chuckled about it. There had been some unexplained nighttime sightings and occurrences in the cemetery recently. There were stories of locked-up family crypts with heavy marble stone doors being found open and the coffins within being moved or strewn around as if they were tossed around like toys in a child's tantrum. There were sightings of glowing smoke like human forms moving through the cemetery as well. Strange noises, torturous screams, all coming from within the church itself, the very church against which we were now leaning. Some of these stories even managed to make it into the local newspapers. The entire village was abuzz, and the stories of a variety of theories about sources behind the strange phenomena were surfacing. No one knew for sure, but these theories ranged from normal to the paranormal. I decided to share them with the group, just for some kicks. It was the paranormal theories I shared, obviously. I just wanted to scare them. The guys didn't take too well to those ghostly or superstitious speculations. I think I was told to shut up more times in the first few minutes I spent telling those stories than in my entire life to that point. It was worth it though. Looking back now, I can laugh at it, but what was to come ruined our weekend plans. The noises were getting closer. We could make out the sound of the stones being stepped on, and a strange humming type of sound was accompanying it. Panic was beginning to take over in the group as we huddled together, backs against the church wall for some form of protection from behind. Protection from what we didn't know. All we had for protection was that now empty bottle of rum, but what good was that going to be against something ethereal? All of a sudden, noises began to come from inside the church. We could even feel a strange vibration coming through the wall. Our nerves were shot. Something was in front of us, moving in our direction, and something else was coming from behind, or from within the wall of the church against which we were leaning. None of us wanted to know what it was. None of us wanted to hang around to find out what it was. We just wanted to be back on my grandmother's porch talking drivel and laughing again. How were we going to get back to safety? Which direction would we take? Would we risk continuing on the path we were going, which was just taking us deeper into the cemetery and further away from the security of home? Or would we head back in the direction from which we came, taking the chance of encountering whatever was headed our way from that direction? Would we move slow, stealthy, or were we just going to bolt? Those questions were answered for us when the church window above our heads just flew open with a crash. We thought of ourselves as men up to that point, but when that window flew open, 5 men became 5 boys, and it was every boy for himself. The self-preservation instinct took in, and we were gone in a flash, each running in the direction and speed that they chose. There was no looking back for each other, nor thought of anything other than getting the hell out of there and back to safety. I thought the others would have run with me, as I knew the graveyard the best, but that wasn't the case. I took the shortest, most direct route back. I was going to run over or through whatever was coming. It had to catch my blur. However, as I took the first turn on that path, glanced behind to see who was there with me, I saw no one. I hoped the others were going to be okay, but I wasn't going back to find out. 5 minutes later, I was on my grandmother's terrace, out of breath and gasping for air. My initial thought was to get some help from my parents and uncles to go looking for the others, but there was no one at home. There were no lights on in the house, no cars in the yard, just the security lights around the house as usual. I began a worried pacing of the veranda and keeping an eye out for my cousins and their friends. It took about 15 minutes before the first of them showed up. It was Charles, and he, too, was gasping for air. Half an hour later, Paul showed up with Fabian in tow, but where was Dirk? He should have been back by now, even if he took the longest route. I ran inside to get some torchlight for us to head back into the graveyard to look for Dirk. I managed to find 2 and headed back to the patio. I gave one to Charles and said, "Let's go. We've got to find him." I told Paul to get his car so we could use lights from it to assist us. We all piled into Paul's car and headed back to the cemetery. We knew the path would not allow us to get the car all the way into the graveyard, but we needed as much light as we could get. We were scared enough as it was, and lack of light was not something we were going to be without. Paul and Fabian stayed with the car, while Charles and I took the torches and hesitantly headed back in. We got back to the side of the church where we had been crouched and cowering. The window was closed and there was no sign of Dirk. We began to shout for him as we walked, hoping that we would get a reply or some sign of his whereabouts. We could see the lights from Paul's car, and we signaled them that we were moving the search. We walked up and down just about every pathway in the cemetery looking for them, without any sign. We were just about to head back to the car when we heard those all too familiar sounds again. Gravel being stepped on, twigs breaking underfoot, and the shuffling of leaves from the footsteps. A chill ran down my spine. My hair stood on end, and my goosebumps got goosebumps. Charles turned to me and shouted for us to run, and we did. We could see the car lights flashing in the distance and could hear the horn blowing, and we headed in that direction. We were moving as fast as we could across the hazardous terrain, but only managed a few steps when, in an instant, I stumbled and fell. Apparently there was a freshly dug grave which we did not see before, and I found it the hard way. I'm not sure how long I was out, but when I partially regained senses, I was on my back and could only see the slight glow of the moonlight through the treetops and clouds. Everywhere else around me was complete darkness. It felt as if I was in a tunnel or a hole. Then it hit me. I was in a grave. That truly freaked me out, as images from the many horror films I had seen through my life flashed through my head, where the victims were buried alive. I did not know what happened to Charles, but I hoped he made it back to the car and would soon be coming with help. I felt a sharp pain running up my leg and back, and struggled to move. I reached around searching for my torchlight, but was unsuccessful. Fear began to intensify in me, and I forced myself to my feet. As intense as the pain was in my leg, the fear of what could follow was even worse. I felt around to find the walls and hopefully a foothold to get myself out. I was struggling in the darkness to get out, while shouting for help, when from out of the darkness, a voice saying my name came from behind me, and I felt a hand on my shoulder. I thought, hey, that's it. My time's up. I'm gonna die. Then whatever it was wrapped its arms around me, gripped me tightly, and said my name in my ear again. I felt myself being pulled backwards by whatever had me in its grip. I could not speak or scream, but I suddenly felt this overwhelming strength surging through me. I pulled the tentacles off me and pushed whatever it was back. In a flash, I was up that wall and out of that grave, moving like Superman. I climbed that wall like it was nothing. Spider-Man had nothing on me. I was just about to pull myself completely out when I felt a hand hold onto my leg. Then the voice in the dark said, "Mark, it's me, it's Dirk. Stop freaking out, dude." It took a couple of seconds, but a warm feeling of release began to flow through me. And as I reached the top of the grave, I found my voice. "Holy crap, Dirk, you just about gave me a heart attack, man. Give me your hand, let me help you out, dude." I was on my stomach, reaching back down into the grave, trying to find Dirk's hand, when the sound started again. The sounds were very close, almost on top of me. I turned over and onto my back, ready to fight for my life. The brightness of the light in my eyes was intense and frightening, but then I heard the familiar voices from Charles, Paul, and Fabian, letting me know it was them. Needless to say, the expletives were flying from all of us, and in the excitement, I almost forgot about Dirk. We spotted the light into the hole and located Dirk, reached down and worked together to pull him out. We made our way back to the car, being exceptionally careful to not all end up falling into another unseen pit, and then we took the route back to my grandmother's house. Upon our reaching safety, we realized that both Dirk and I had hurt our legs in the fall. They weren't broken, but they were hurting like crazy. We put some ice in bags, sat in the recliners, and put the bags of ice on our legs to ease the swelling and the pain. We knew our weekend camping and surfing trip would have to be postponed because of our injuries, but that disappointment was quelled by the feeling of being safe back at home. We never found out what those noises were or what caused them, and we never took another drunken nighttime venture into that cemetery for sure. However, from time to time, we do still hear those footsteps and those noises, even if that's in our dreams.